Well, to try to get to the bottom of all of this, I'm joined on the set by our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, first of all, why is Russia sending drones into eastern Germany?
Well, this is part of a Russian campaign to try to destabilize the West, destabilize the European Union, destabilize NATO by sending in drones over European airspace or sometimes planes over European airspace to try to divide them over support for Ukraine. We've had this incident of this drone at Leipzig airport, which didn't explode. That was the good news. It was near a Ukrainian plane. And that is something that I think is only down to the fact that it wasn't the Russians who were very clever at getting this drone to explode and cause damage. But it's led, as you were saying in your headline, to the arrival in Russia of the head of the CIA, John Ratcliffe. This is a very rare occurrence. As you said, only 5 years. Well, it's been 5 years since the last time a CIA official went to Russia. This doesn't happen unless there's something very big happening. So there are two possibilities. Either it's to discuss these operations by the Russians into the West. This is called escalation management, if you like, to try to prevent the Russians from doing even more of this. Or the second reason is to try to secure the release of Americans who are being held in Russian jails, either through negotiation or through swapping with Russians who are being held in the United States. We don't know. What we do know is that the Americans have told the Ukrainians to refrain from fire into Russia while John Ratcliffe is on the ground, because I don't want any more damage done, and that would also upset the negotiations. But something big is happening behind the scenes, and that's why John Ratcliffe has gone there.
Is there any chance that Russia's efforts to try and divide Europe and NATO might actually have the opposite effect?
Well, that is the threat for Vladimir Putin. He desperately wants a victory. Remember, since the Ukraine war started back in 2022, this was going to be a 3-day war where he was going to walk in, take control of Ukraine, and that was going to be the end of it. This has been dragging on. The Russians have been suffering huge losses. They haven't gained the areas that they said they were going to gain. There's been very little progress over the past few months. So Vladimir Putin is looking at this possibly affecting his own popularity standing in Russia. He needs some kind of other victory, and that's why there are these warnings in Eastern Europe, in the Baltic states, in Germany, in Romania, in Poland, that the Russians could try just to test NATO, to see how resilient NATO is, whether NATO would respond, and whether this would divide public opinion over those who carry on supporting Ukraine and those who say this is enough, we need to stop doing this because we're going to be face to face with Russia. That's what Vladimir Putin is hoping for, but it doesn't look as though it's going to work. If you look at a Eurobarometer opinion poll, which was released by the European Union, they say 80% of European Union members support the financial backing that is being provided to Ukraine by the EU. 66% agree that Ukraine should join the EU when ready, and 89% feel sympathy towards the Ukrainians. So the opposite effect would be a galvanizing force, bringing those powers together to say, this is enough, we're going to have to stand up to Russia and bring our forces together and help Ukraine even more to fight the war. That appears to be the direction in which things are going.
Philip, just a quick word on hybrid warfare. It's actually nothing new when it comes to Russia, isn't it?
No, and if you look back, it's been building up over the last 4 years since the start of the war in Ukraine. There was another opinion poll which was done by the Henry Jackson Society in the United Kingdom. Just in the UK alone, they say they have seen a 1,586% increase in hybrid war attacks since the start of the war in Ukraine. Power grids, healthcare, power networks, underground cables, cyber warfare, and even the reports of little green men, that's to say soldiers, not in the UK but elsewhere in the European Union, who have not got Russian labels or branding, but they're operating illegally in those areas. And that is something that I think is also of much concern to the European Union, because they say, well, we've seen a strong increase. They like to affect elections. We have elections coming up here in France next year. Another reason to be extremely vigilant.
Philip, thank you for that. France 24's Philip Turle.